Chapter 4 My Wife Saki 2 Days of Depression and Drugs. 3 years after I started living with Saki, I suddenly became depressed. I didn't know the cause. I suspected that no longer living a carefree life alone was causing me stress, but I couldn't imagine life without Saki. We loved each other, so living together couldn't be the cause. When I was depressed, I lost all motivation and spent my days lounging around or rereading manga, especially by Kajiwara Ikki, Morohoshi Daijiro, and Saibara Rieko. And by rereading, I literally mean rereading the same manga over and over again, passing the time by surrendering to the predictable lull. Saki, stressed by office politics, quit Company A and became a freelancer. She only worked there because she forced herself to, but she couldn't bring herself to quit. Her emotional stability weakened by the day, and she became too painful to witness. I persuaded her to quit. She didn't seem to regret it, saying, "It was about time." Perhaps feeling a sense of relief, she became lazy for a while. Since I was lazy due to my depression, we enjoyed a lazy life together. We lived off of my savings from the publishing bubble. We had a little under 20 million yen, so we took it easy. For the next few years, we lived lazily with nothing to show for it. Cannabis, LSD, ecstasy. I'm a lightweight, but I strangely have an affinity for drugs, and I always had plenty of them around to kill time. I had the full set when I was single, but stopped using powders, stimulants, cocaine, heroin, after I got married. I told Saki about my experiences with them. The after effects of the bubble bursting were evident in the publishing industry, especially within the subculture genre. Books were selling poorly, and the genre was nearly on the brink of extinction. Despite this, I was confident that I'd make it if I just worked hard. Gradually, Saki began to feel anxious about money. She began taking on small jobs and working steadily, but she couldn't hold on to them for very long. Saki was a hard-working and methodical person at heart, so she worked diligently and meticulously. She also had excellent editing skills, but she couldn't accept the idea of merely working to make a living. She put her everything into her work, which inevitably caused stress to build up. Her physical and mental health declined, so she eventually quit. My depression lingered, and after 4 years of living together, she sat me down. "Just do something. Anything. It pains me to see you so unmotivated. You can do it." I gradually began to feel that it was time for me to pull myself together. I resumed working for a magazine. However, the publishing world was much different than before, with many jobs being high effort and low pay. It was only in my mid-30s that I truly began to feel the instability of working freelance. It also made me realize that I'd been living in a bubble up until then. Little by little, I started being productive again. I published my first book in years, Psychedelic and Trance. It was the #1 best-selling book at Tower Books in Shibuya during its first month of release, and the first edition sold 10,000 copies. I guess if you put your mind to it, you can write a book that sells. Like Saki said, I'm right-brained. I could do anything if I really applied myself. I was finally starting to regain the confidence I had lost during my depression. Marriage. Saki really appreciated my right-brained sensibilities. You're sharp in a way that any old genius isn't. Your eye for art, your ear for sound, your way with words, they're amazing. Saki was a genius herself that showed no interest in other geniuses, so much so that she was dismissive of people that boasted high academic scores. Regarding people who prided themselves on their studies, she said, "It's pathetic to try to feel good about something like that." She might have been speaking to her younger self. She was very critical of others. Of Aoyama Masaaki, she said, "His cowardice shows on his face. He's a liar. I appreciate his writing, but I don't like him." She was quite harsh. However, she showed a strong interest in right brains like myself and Nekojiru. Growing up, my parents just didn't understand my need for individuality. I rebelled against them because they wanted to force me into a mold. Saki eased my growing resentment of being misunderstood. She really understood me so well. I had never felt so understood before in my life. Being understood is the same as being showered with love. Surely love is the culmination of mutual understanding. As a kid, my parents and teachers often told me that I was crazy and too much. Looking back, I was the picture of ADHD. You may be intense, but you're not weird. You're honest and straightforward, and that's what irritates people with common sense. No one understands your taste, she'd say affirmingly. Talking to Saki helped me gain confidence. I became conscious of things I wasn't conscious of before. I was able to look at myself objectively. Isn't that the greatest achievement between a man and a woman living under the same roof? I felt so relaxed around Saki. But that was also because she made a lot of effort to accommodate me. We never legally registered to marry. There was no ulterior motive behind it. I was just lazy and Saki said she didn't care. Even her father thought it'd be best if we didn't legally marry. I had a great time on our first solo trip to Yakushima. Saki later told me she found the trip nerve-wracking. Even in my relationship with her, she was suppressing her true self and forcing herself outside of her comfort zone a little too much. She rarely expressed her feelings outright. She'd act like nothing was wrong while stress built up, then lash out at random. Saki was like a different person during those times, and it scared me. "I can't take this anymore," she exclaimed, smashing the dishes. "Please don't bottle up your emotions anymore," I begged. "I need you to tell me what you're feeling." "You're supposed to sense these things. I shouldn't have to tell you. You're bad at it. The older guys I've dated before always figured it out. You're just immature." Seeing her faking it, even in front of people she disliked, made me anxious. I wondered if she was pushing herself to the point of neuroticism, longing for euthanasia. I tried to return to the busy, hustling days of the bubble era, but then Saki fell into a deep depression. I can't pinpoint why. It could have been anxiety about a lifestyle that was eating away at her savings, or my own depression catching up with me. While I somehow managed to get work, Saki's career was growing increasingly unstable. The skin on her hands and feet grew rough from stress. But she had to work, so she did. It seemed like she was anxious about the future. Saki wasn't used to being poor, even when she was unable to find work. She wasn't the optimistic type either, and she worked hard at jobs she hated. The more she pushed herself, the worse her depression grew. She was working as a freelance editor for a major publishing company's theater magazine. The work was a source of constant pressure for her. She called everything lame. She couldn't stand lame things. This is something she shared with Nekojiru. She was too proud for her own good. Being lame seemed like a thorn in her side. She had a rough relationship with her boss. "She's so stupid. She's inconsiderate. She's forgetful. And she's overly physical with me and invites me to women-only events. She treats me like a lesbian, like an equal, but we don't get along at all. I can't stand her." From what I can tell, her boss was certainly a bit insensitive, but Saki was also quite selfish. She would often call me after work, slumped over at her desk without the energy to come home. I'd answer the phone and pick her up from the publishing company. I don't want to take a train or a taxi. I had no choice but to hold her hand and walk an hour back to the apartment in Asakusabashi. Saki was exhausted, so haggard that it was painful to witness. There was no strength in her hands. Her eyes were vacant, all from masking at work. Her manic depressive episodes ramped up, and she began talking about feeling hopeless. I wonder if my depression infected her. I introduced Saki to a psychiatrist I met through work. "Just go and see him," I said. "Absolutely not." I recommended some antidepressants and tranquilizers I had on hand, and she took them occasionally. But psychiatric medications work differently for different people, so I kept telling her to seek proper treatment. Finally, Saki started attending H Clinic. That was 1 month before she died. I interviewed a doctor at H Clinic for a book on mental illness in Bessatsu Takarajima. After reading the interview, Saki decided that was the doctor for her. It was around this time that Saki constantly started talking about her desire to be euthanized. From the very beginning of our relationship, she'd blurt out something like, "There's something ice cold inside of me. I want to be euthanized. I just want to die. And I've already met everyone I want to meet and I've done everything I wanted to do. I'm ready." But I thought that was only half true. When she was in a good mood, she seemed so happy and energetic. Saki's suicidal thoughts were getting more and more intense. This was the beginning of a hellish era for Saki and I. "I'll die." "The cord broke," Saki called me on my cell phone. I had no idea what she was talking about. I thought she was making a joke, but she was serious. She had tried to hang herself in the bathroom of the publishing company where she worked. The cord broke and she lived. I rushed to pick her up. Once again, I held Saki's hand and we walked home. "I'm having suicidal thoughts," Saki said. "I want to die." Saki often spoke of her desire for euthanasia, and this is how she explained it. "Life is hard. I'm not afraid of death. I just can't stand the pain." She'd started to believe that clinging to life was shameful. "I'll die," she once said. What exactly did life mean to Saki? People must be afraid to die. That's why they work, play, love, and laugh while keeping the thought of death at bay. I'm afraid of dying too. There's still so much I want to do. I'm lazy when I'm depressed, sure, but I don't want to die. Suicidal ideation. What a frightening term. The desire to commit suicide. It's believed that suicides among depressed patients arise from these suicidal thoughts. No one starts at 100% ideation. They send out SOS signals until the very end. Saki's first attempt to hang herself in the publishing company bathroom failed, but somewhere in her heart, she must have been hoping to have been saved. Wasn't it her determination to fight her depression that led her to H Clinic? Anxious warfare. Saki began seeing a psychiatrist. She was prescribed Prozac. It takes time to find the right medication, so going to a psychiatrist is better done sooner than later. Looking back, Saki's visit to H Clinic came far too late. She must have been suffering for so long. One night, I was awoken by a loud bang. I opened the bedroom door and found Saki tying a towel to the doorknob, preparing to hang herself. I swiftly removed the towel from around her neck and checked her condition. She was fine. She was alive. There was bruising on her neck, but... "What are you doing?" Saki replied emotionlessly. "I messed up. Sorry. Did I wake you?" Her expressionless face was that of someone yearning for death. She might really go through with it. I was terrified. The fact that I was the only one who saw this side of Saki only added to the mounting pressure. I once considered having Saki's parents come over while I lived peacefully back at my parents' house. Our parents were in favor of Saki and I breaking up, so when they heard what I had to say, they immediately tried bringing her home. "I'm never leaving here. I'll start over again," she said resolutely. In the end, they left. If she returned to her parents' house, she'd have to mask there. She just couldn't do it in her current state. Saki didn't want anyone else seeing her depressed. She was incredibly prideful. At any moment, Saki might become overcome with suicidal urges and resort to killing herself. I couldn't take my eyes off her. It was a battle of nerves. A month before she died, Saki quit her job at the theater magazine. At that point, she felt temporary relief. She really hated that job. I hoped that'd make her feel better, but still, I remained on guard. I tried to stay awake as much as possible and made sure to go to bed only after Saki had fallen asleep. The slightest sound from the room, the bathroom, or the kitchen would startle me. I jumped straight into action. The sound of a chair being moved, the sound of coffee being made, a book being dropped, a door being slammed. All of them sounded ominous. I was on high alert, determined to protect my wife at all costs. I had to be ready to pounce on her at a moment's notice. Even when I went to sleep at the end of the day, I was constantly vigilant, unable to fall into a deep sleep in case Saki sneaked out to try something. But then came a day where the opportunity presented itself. Last-minute shopping. September 27th, 2003. That day, Saki was at her lowest. I didn't know when she'd resort to the worst possible measure. Every second was chock full of tension. If I took my eyes off her, Saki might suddenly take serious action and end things between us for good. I couldn't let her out of my sight for even a moment. We went for a walk in hopes of boosting our mood. I forced her to. We often went for walks around the neighborhood to get some exercise. Saki was always keen to pet the cats, both domestic and stray. She would get so happy and excited. "The cats at the Oden shop are brothers, and the younger one lets me pet him more," she'd say. But today she was quiet, walking slowly with her head bowed. The people walking down the street seemed unconcerned about our plight. As we passed through the shopping district, Saki asked me to wait for her outside a clothing store. It'd been a while since she'd taken such initiative, so I did. I wondered what was going on. After a little while, she came out of the store and handed me an item saying, "Here you go." They were men's socks. Come to think of it, the ones I'd been wearing at the time were really worn out. Saki, in a state of depression so severe that it was almost impossible for her to speak, bought these for me. She spent what little money she had in her nearly empty wallet. It was her last purchase, from a caring wife who loved her husband. To me, it was a parting gift. We returned to our walk. I needed to break the silence, so I asked, "Can you remember any fun you've had up until now?" "No." "What about, any particularly good memories?" Yeah, maybe the Juno Reactor concert in Disneyland." "There must have been more. There must have been so much more in our lives, Saki." I wanted her to remember. I wanted her to feel the joy of living again. Still, I was happy that she was able to remember even just 2 things in her depressed state. A year ago, in the summer, at Village Vanguard in Odaiba, our 2 books, Psychedelic and Trance, and 2-:+/drug special, were stacked side by side. Saki smiled and said, "We're matching." She looked so happy. I wanted to see her smile again. "That's right. We had fun at Yakushima." "You were looking at me with that beautiful smile. Please don't die, Saki. We still had a long way to go." Surrounded by macaws at Yakushima, you clung to me for dear life. Dying is 10 times scarier than any monkey. So Saki, I may have been a good-for-nothing husband in many ways, but I wanted to protect you. Anxious Warfare 2. Saki stayed up all night on her computer, showing no signs of going to bed. As the tension grew, she became less and less willing to fall asleep. It was a dangerous night. At any moment, she might make a move while I wasn't looking. "Ah, it's here," Saki muttered. What on earth could have happened? Saki smiled wryly. Her period had finally arrived after a year of not having come. They say that when depression is at its worst, a person doesn't even have the energy to commit suicide. The most dangerous window is when one is beginning to recover their energy but remains depressed. Perhaps the onset of menstruation brought with it a subtle surge of vitality that was previously absent, the final push she needed. I can connect the dots now, but for whatever reason, I didn't that night. The night wore on. Before I could even sleep, morning had come. I still couldn't take my eyes off of Saki. The sunlight grew brighter as birds chirped outside. The newspaper delivery man came and went. The vibrant sounds of people beginning their day filled the air. I gently embraced Saki, who was still alive at this point. She stared at me with vacant eyes. "I'm sorry, I'm just depressed," she said as I held her. "I'm going to take a bath and go to bed." Relieved, I dozed off in the living room. I'd been so on guard that I hadn't slept a wink. I'd stayed up all night with Saki, so I was exhausted. I closed my eyes for maybe 10 minutes. I would forever regret that brief moment of rest. I woke up with a start. Huh? Where's Saki? She was still in the bathroom. I became worried. Could it be? I ran to the bathroom. I grabbed the doorknob and pushed, but it wouldn't budge. The door was heavy, as if rejecting me. I tried to push it harder, but something was blocking it. I charged at the door and slammed into it. Once, twice, 3 times. Finally, the door nudged open. Oh my God. Saki had tied a rope to the doorknob and hanged herself. Her body lay limp and lifeless on the floor. No! She looked calm, as if she had completely resigned herself from life. She looked like she was asleep. She still had some warmth in her. Her complexion is fine. Maybe she was just unconscious. Saki! I needed an ambulance. Saki was rushed to the hospital. I was in a state of panic, having no idea what was about to unfold. Sirens, doctors in white coats, the city in the early morning, the peaceful chirping of sparrows. Sound swirled around in my head, disconnecting me from reality. Saki, she's probably still alive. Saki, you're kidding. This is some sick joke. Saki. Once I danced wildly at a rave, passed out, and was carted away via ambulance. Another time I'd overdosed and the same thing happened. I've rode in an ambulance 4 times in total, but I'd never had such a painful ride before. It was far worse than when I was the one on the stretcher. Saki was already dead. She had a calm expression in her final moments. I kept looking at her face as I waited for the autopsy at the emergency hospital. Her death had become certain. It became reality. Her pale face slowly grew blue. It was cool to the touch. But still, I couldn't believe it. Saki was dead. She was gone. I burst into tears. I cried like a baby, openly sobbing in front of everyone. No matter how much I cried, my tears never stopped. In the end, I couldn't save Saki. Surrounded by enemies, I fell into a kind of manic state during the days leading up to the funeral. I regretfully fulfilled my duties. I contacted everyone I could think of, my family, friends, coworkers. I also contacted Akada, the person in charge of the hardcover edition of this book. 5 days earlier, I had a meeting at Asuka Shinsha to discuss the publication of a visual kei magazine. I was planning to go to Toyama to do some research and report back. My wife has been emotionally unstable lately, so I've been keeping an eye on her, I once said. Akada remembered and was worried about her. In fact, I was wondering whether I should have my wife accompany me to Toyama for the interview. I left a voicemail on Akada's cell phone. There's been an emergency, so I'll have to postpone tomorrow's meeting. Suppressing my distraught emotions, I added as calmly as possible. Saki committed suicide. She hanged herself. The autopsy was performed at the emergency hospital. Her body gradually grew cold. All I could do was cling to my wife's body and sob. She only grew colder. If my overflowing tears can warm you again, then I'll continue to cry. It pushed me to the brink of despair, making me wonder if a human could really grow that cold. Saki, you're dying. There's still so much I want to do with you. It's so selfish of you to leave me alone. What on earth should I do? I couldn't believe my own tears. Saki-chan! I heard a scream from behind me. Saki-chan! It was her parents. Saki's father was extremely emotional, hurling abuse at me before I even saw Saki's body. What are you doing? It's all your fault. Saki couldn't have been a lunatic like you. You killed her. You killed our daughter. Give Saki back, her parents howled. No matter how cunning one may be, their weaknesses spill out during panic. Saki's younger brother rushed to the scene. We usually got along well, but today he was different. He was ice cold. Wails echoed throughout the room. As I sobbed, Saki's younger brother muttered, "He who cries first wins, huh?" Even Saki's brother turned on me. With Saki gone, I was surrounded by enemies on all sides. I was cut off from Saki's family and my own, and Saki, the only person I had, was torn away by the cold hand of death. As I broke down in the emergency room, my parents spoke to me. "You're an adult, so you have to deal with this on your own. We won't help you or keep in contact with you. We don't want any trouble." Their words could only be interpreted as a declaration of estrangement. But none of that mattered to me at the time. All I could think was that Saki was dead and she wasn't coming back. The overwhelming loss disrupted my autonomic nervous system, leaving me in a constant state of hypertension. It felt like I was the only person left on this earth. Books to die for. Our castle collapsed. Saki's parents and relatives descended on our apartment. "Don't attend the funeral. We won't tell you where her grave is." "Give back all of my daughter's belongings." They sorted through Saki's things as if I weren't even there. They combed through her vast collection of clothing and books. I remember the books Saki loved. Ever since middle school, Saki said there was a glacier in her heart. It was begging to be put out of its misery. That coldness will never disappear, no matter what. I think her stubborn desire for death might have been influenced by the books she read in her youth. Saki had an incredible collection. She couldn't bring everything from home into our apartment, so her room at her parents' house became her personal library. Saki once slit her wrists in the past. Her parents and brother were completely bewildered, so I suggested they take up some of the books in Saki's collection. They're too difficult to read, her relatives complained. But they wouldn't know unless they saw it for themselves. Saki only read literature about dying. The only slightly positive books in her collection were Elmer's Adventure, The Man Who Fought the Bear, and Animal Doctor, children's books and manga. Saki was trying to change, but each time she visited her parents' house, she was lured in by those deathly texts. So Saki picked them out and brought them to our apartment. "I'll get rid of them one day," she promised. She'd kill time by reading Slam Dunk. She loved it. She was obsessed with the character Mitsui. I bought her the deluxe edition, and she always read it before bed. Saki was a fan of yaoi and read Slam Dunk through a Fujoshi's lens. She loved yaoi so much that she'd visit the Ariake comic market just to buy doujinshi. The Wake. The family asked me to hand over the computer I shared with Saki. It housed so many memories. Saki's father had acted as the guarantor for our apartment. He canceled our lease and asked me to move out ASAP. Her parents took everything. All that was left were the cold, barren walls. I was alone in the room where Saki and I shared it all. I was crushed by loneliness during these nights. But there was still something I had to do. I had to gather our friends for the wake. It was Wednesday, October 22nd at 7 p.m. 8 of my closest friends attended. Akada was the first to arrive. He brought canned beer and snacks. Rain began to fall. Saki's room was completely sparse. It was bleak, really. Only a CD player, speakers, and trance CDs remained. I suddenly remembered Saki and I's ecstasy when we danced. She bounced up and down innocently, exuding a cute, girlish charm. She seemed genuinely happy. Tears welled up in my eyes. Ah, that's right, I still have our bed. I'd no longer be living in our apartment, so I had had to say my goodbyes. I turned to Akada. "Can you help me move it out?" "Sure." We disassembled it together and took the elevator down to the dumpster to the first floor. Our breath billowed out in the cold rain. I'm still alive. I still can't believe Saki is dead. Perhaps some post-funeral mania was kicking in. Despite my desperate grief, I felt the need to do what needed to be done. I was working efficiently, just as I had during the publishing boom. The intercom was ringing by the time we got back, and friends started to trickle in. Saki and I weren't religious, but we created a makeshift altar on a chair and decorated it with photos of her. I couldn't bear the silence, so I played the soundtrack to Pulp Fiction. Yamada from Tokyo Koshi also came over. He brought a bottle of preservative-free wine, which even I could enjoy as someone who doesn't drink. Yamano Hajime was in attendance as well. "Want some oolong tea? We brought some wine and canned beer," he said as he unpacked his bag of drinks. Seino Eiichi came over with his girlfriend and comforted me, saying, "If there's anything you need, just let me know." Milky Isobe, Saki's former boss at the publishing company she worked for, a female colleague, and Nicholas Keiji rolled in as well. We talked about Saki until the early hours of the morning. Thanks to them, I was able to escape my loneliness, if only for a little while. But the inevitable was already approaching. I had to move out of the apartment as soon as possible. Since I didn't have any relatives willing to act as a guarantor, it was difficult to find a place to rent. Finally, through a mutual friend, I managed to rent out a guest house for foreigners in Chofu. The rent was 46,000 yen, no gas or water, shared bathroom. It was a far cry from the swanky apartment I shared with Saki. "Won't your parents act as guarantors?" Akada asked. I had no choice but to tell him the truth. "We're estranged, I guess. I haven't seen them in ages." My relationship with my father was terrible and remains so to this day. With the help of a friend, a chunk of my manga collection was sold off to a mandarake in Akihabara. They gave me a fair price, and that helped me supplement my living expenses for the time being. Nearly 1,000 of my favorite records, mostly techno, trance, and deep cuts, were graciously stored at a friend's place in the countryside. I significantly reduced my belongings. I threw away 5 of my 6 bookshelves. I only kept a few items that reminded me of Saki. Saki's parents held my mistakes over my head and blamed me for their daughter's death. They doted on her so much. and they were devastated to have lost her. I hadn't told them much about Saki's suicide attempts and her depression, so they were shocked by her sudden death. But given Saki's personality, they should have been able to guess as much. They must have known that deep down she was selfish. Still, they seemed to want to believe that I killed her, not that she killed herself. They say love is blind, but their love was reserved only for blood relatives. To them, I was unworthy. And so, Saki's body and I were forever separated. No money. October 27th, 5 days after the wake. I received a call from Akada. I have a proposition for you. Why don't you put your visual MOOC on hold and write about the incident? Think about it. Your wife, Nekojiru and Aoyama, all three were close to you and they all committed suicide in the same way. I think your work would be meaningful for those left behind and for those considering suicide. I was taken aback by such a request. I didn't even know if I still had the energy to write it all down. But I'd been obsessing over Saki's death and I needed to move on. Otherwise, I'd fall apart. I understand. I accepted Akada's request, but I had some concerns. It's a fine plan, but I don't know if I have the energy. I'll do it. I have to write. I'll write down all my memories of Saki. I've been too dependent on her. Ever since she died, I've lost my focus. I don't know what to do. Tears rolled down my cheeks. Akada expressed worry for me. Suddenly I realized I hadn't had anything but water for 3 days. My reflection was ghastly. I had no money. I could only earn 50,000 yen by submitting proposals to TV stations and paying my rent with the novel I'd serialized in Burst High. When the police asked me to cough up a 30,000 yen autopsy fee, I was broke and struggled to control my anger. I had lost everything. My savings, which up until a few years prior had amounted to around 20 million yen, my home, my wife. All that was left was a loneliness so intense it made me quake. The foreign housing complex I lived in was a 40-minute walk from the nearest station. There were a few Japanese people living there, including myself. I just couldn't get used to it. I didn't want to stay holed up in my room, so I'd go to the head shop and bar in Okachimachi and drink copious amounts of coffee, up to 10 cups a day. I'd cut ties with drugs purely because of my finances. Caffeine and nicotine were my only options. I drank coffee and smoked in silence. This was how I killed time. Meanwhile, Saki's parents were blowing up my cell phone. "You killed her! Give Saki back! You're trying to gain sympathy by lying about being estranged from your parents, but you aren't fooling me. This is your fault. We're the victims here. You should have taken care of her." No matter how hard I objected, they were so wrapped up in their own delusions that conversations never panned out. One thing was clear. They firmly believed that they were completely innocent. Maybe that's why they felt compelled to blame someone else. Those calls plunged me further into depression, over and over again. My libido was shot. I had no desire for sex. I stopped masturbating. I had no appetite. I'd go to the 105 yen section of Book Off to buy magazines like Newton and Wired. I'd cut out pictures I liked and make collages to soothe my pain. That was the only thing that comforted me. I used to buy and listen to CDs a lot, but now I had no money, so I could only afford the ones in the sale section. I started having auditory hallucinations. I made an appointment with a psychiatrist I became friends with during a magazine interview and asked him to up my dosage of tranquilizers and antidepressants. Looking back, Saki was always thinking about others because she was so concerned about the time, place, and occasion. She was always trying to accommodate others. In reality, she had a very strong sense of what she liked and disliked. When she disliked someone, it caused her to feel conflicted. But she never revealed that to others. She was always acting like a good girl. Acting came natural to her. No wonder she got so tired of playing a role. She'd let off steam at home, sure, but in the end, I could tell she was always trying so hard to accommodate me. There were times where I found myself wondering what Saki was really like, when she was furious and when she was elated. Saki's father would harshly berate me. "Everything out of your mouth is an excuse. You ruined her life and then you killed her." He wanted to blame me for her suicide. He didn't seem to think for a moment that the problem could have stemmed from within the family. He wanted someone, something to blame other than himself. But Saki's mental decline first festered at home. It started when she was in school. Saki's father, who showed no remorse whatsoever, could be described as someone solely looking out for himself. Deep down, he was a good, earnest, and simple man, but he was hopelessly narrow-minded. He panicked, not wanting to accept his daughter's death. He chose instead to blame it all on me. That aura of hatred was oppressive. I want to die too. That's what I thought for a moment. But my death wouldn't solve a thing. Saki wouldn't come back. Nobody would be happy. But it was just so painful. I felt like I was going crazy. I wanted to run away from it all. Just like Saki, everyone left behind would want to know why. But it's not that simple. It's merely speculation of the bereaved. I'm at fault in many ways. I regret letting my depression get so bad. The fact that my depression led to a sexless marriage made Saki sad. I overdosed on Ritalin, which is now illegal, got high, and masturbated for the first time in a while, a habit I'd had since my single days. Saki found out I was masturbating without her and she got mad at me. The economy was rough, so maybe it was a mistake to let her take a job she didn't want. Saki's parents say that was her reason. Her irregular periods, which had been coming after a while of absence, may also have pushed her to do it. I think age played a part too. Saki and Nekojiru held the same resolution. I will never grow old. I would rather die than become an old lady. They both looked so young. They could have passed for students, but Saki was 35, too old to be considered a girl. So the question remains, did they choose death in favor of aging? I once showed an abridged version of this manuscript to a female editor at a publishing company. I didn't know Saki, she said, but as someone who never met her, I can't bring myself to like the Saki portrayed in this manuscript. She's totally dependent on her father, dancing through the publishing boom, and when life gets too difficult, she dies. Frankly, I can't sympathize with her. Objectively speaking, Saki was very selfish. But even if she was, my love for her remains the same. No matter how selfish she was, to me, she was my beloved Saki-chan. That editor simply didn't have eyes to see, reasons to commit. I'll die. She died just as she said she would. She looked so at peace. If she committed suicide, it's because she wanted to. But are there really people that just die? Those left behind try to justify the suicide victim's choice with conjecture. Sometimes this leads to overly self-centered conclusions, and I'm the same way. I can't help but wonder. What on earth drove Saki to her death? A job she didn't want, her fading youth, a sexless marriage, a husband who didn't work, putting on a mask in front of everyone, an unusually high level of pride, selfishness, depression. All of these factors wove together to give Saki a death wish, to nudge her off the edge. What on earth should I have done? I should have done this. No, that was wrong. I agonized over this and that, trying to highlight my own shortcomings. The more I thought about them, the more it came to mind, and there was no end in sight. My thoughts looped endlessly. The hell of my own depression began anew. My friend, Nekojiru, died, and my former colleague, Aoyama Masaaki, died. Both came as a huge shock. But they pale in comparison to losing Saki, my wife of 6 years and my greatest supporter. I was devastated beyond repair. It opened my eyes. I hadn't realized the extent of grief experienced by Nekojiru's husband and Aoyama's ex-wives. After all, it was someone else's problem. It'd be disrespectful to kill myself. So many people die even if they don't want to. But when Saki committed suicide, I didn't feel disrespected. It was her right. I tried to accept Saki's choice, even if it was the worst possible decision, thinking that it was the only logical conclusion to reach. I think Saki had thought things through very deeply to the point where it was pure impulse. Since her second year of junior high school, she'd wanted to be euthanized. She wanted a quick and painless death. But dying is painful. Isn't there a way to die without suffering? I haven't found out yet, so I continue to live. Let's go to Saki's place. It had been almost 3 months since Saki died, but to me it only felt like 2 or 3 days had passed. In reality, I was busy packing my belongings, moving, and visiting friends, but I didn't process the passage of those 3 months. I was so stressed I couldn't sleep, eat, or make any progress on my manuscript. I focused on packing up my things and moving. Looking back, I was a little manic at the time. The mania subsided after a month and I fell into a severe depression. The mental breakdown of grief was unbearable. My autonomic nervous system was in disarray. I was constantly tense. Whenever I felt unstable, I'd seek refuge at a friend's house. I was especially grateful to Nekojiru's husband, Yamano Hajime. When I couldn't adjust to my new place and fell into a panic, he'd pick me up and take me to his house. Finally sick of it all, I found myself on the roof of an apartment building. Loneliness was inching me forward. Let's go to Saki's place. Nekojiru and Aoyama will be there too. A dull light shone on the rooftop through the overcast sky. If I could just get over that wire mesh, everything would be okay. It would be easier. I staggered to the mesh and put my hand on it. I hiked my heel up and tried to climb forward. The people and cars were tiny beneath me. The sounds of everyday life echoed in the back of my mind. I'll jump. I'll finally be rid of this pain. Forever. I've made up my mind. I'll see you soon, Saki. I put my hand in hers and prepared to throw myself into the void. And at that moment, a collage of faces came to mind. They flowed endlessly like a fountain. Friends, coworkers, old acquaintances, people I just met the other day. Come to think of it, I was short on cash and had borrowed some money from my friends. What would they say if I died without permission? Yoshinaga, live on. No matter how hard it is, live on. I remembered the warm yet tense words of encouragement from my friends who rushed to my side after Saki passed away. They all told me that I'm not alone. Even though I'm shunned by both families, I'm not alone. Akada had repeatedly asked me to write something new. What was I doing while he was trying so hard to be a good editor? Just as I was about to throw myself away, an invisible lifeline caught me. I can't die yet. That's what I thought. That's when I realized I had been totally dependent on Saki. Saki was my lover, my teacher, my mother. She was my lifeline. But that line has snapped. I'm working on this manuscript in a very unstable state. But I can't die yet. My friends and my debts are my new lifelines. Some of my friends said it's too early to write about Saki. But now that she's etched so deeply into my heart, I want to write about her. When I read this back later, I'll probably think that I'm being irrational. But I think that's okay. My life changed completely when Saki died. I faced the biggest crisis of my life. I had to start from scratch.